Welcome to Decode Dune, an exegesis of the Dune universe.
Okay, welcome to Decode Dune, episode 12. We're here. We are ready to dive into this next chapter. That last episode was a little bit of a shorter, not just episode, but a shorter chapter, which I think we're still endlessly trying to get feedback. We've received nothing but compliments about how we're analyzing the text itself, but throw some feedback at us about last episode.
Yeah.
Do you care about my ramblings about Polish black metal band Batushka? What do you think about us talking about real world politics, stuff like civil forfeiture and policing in America? I think we stayed away from anything that's too controversial, but was that we almost cut that out. So we didn't. And a question would be, how do you feel about having listened to that instead of it just being straight up Dune stuff, you know? So anyway, here we are. We are on page 131 of our version or our copy of Dune. Let's just dive right into the beginning. There is probably no more terrible instant of enlightenment than the one in which you discover your father is a man with human flesh. From the collected sayings of Muad'Dib by his future wife, the Princess Irulan. This chapter is interesting. We can summarize it by basically saying Leto is sleep deprived. He's in over his head. He's overwhelmed, and he starts to do Macbeth-esque things. Later on, one of his final kind of maybe his penultimate chapter where he's kind of really involved, he does some wacky things at a dinner, and I but in this chapter he's just alone with Paul, and
Before we jump in, as I often do,
yeah.
I have a Sufi. I have a thing.
Yeah.
And this one's a little mysterious, but I think it applies directly not just to the quote, but how things are going to unfold. So a thief entered the house of a Sufi and found nothing there to steal. As he was leaving, the dervish, sensing his disappointment, threw him the blanket on which he was lying. That's
say that one more time.
Oh yeah, happily. A thief entered the house of a Sufi and found nothing there to steal. As he was leaving, the dervish, sensing his disappointment, threw him the blanket on which he'd been lying.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, good Sufi, right? Thief's got to steal. Sufi's got to be kind.
Yep.
Each to his own. Okay, so I won't dig too deeply yet, but a little later, I'll try to tie that back to what's happening here.
So Paul and Leto are alone. They're having a father-son chat. And Paul's Leto is explaining to Paul what they were saying. Mahdi, Lisan al-Gaib. The Duke basically says, I need to tell you what kind of what's going to be happening soon. I feel like from like a literature analysis aspect of things, I feel like they just did this in this chapter to be able to have Paul tell her later that I feel like this is a more like an element of romance in the writing, not really terribly meaningful. But I didn't really preview this well. Leto basically tells Paul, we're going to start treating your mom like we think that she is going to turn cloak against us or against me. And I need you to understand, if anything ever happens, it was all an act. I never suspected her. Which, what if Paul died and they both died? If it really matters to her so much, fucking write it down. Give the information to someone else. It works out perfectly. Several chapters later, that they are alone, and Paul's able to tell her that he never suspected you.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
I don't know. So this is just me.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm an axe grinder.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that would have been satisfactory to me. Given what transpires, I'm not sure that would be enough for me to be like, oh, I forgive you.
Uh,
I'd be pissed.
you mean if you're Jessica?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'd be equally pissed if I'm Leto and find out that come to find out that Jessica knows he's not going to make it and never said anything. That would also piss me off. So
Yeah.
so neither side of the street is clean here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I believe a lot of this is put in place just to cement the love between the two of them.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, yeah, so just to let you know, it's definitely not your mom. We're going to act like she is. It's not very nice. It's a hateful thing that I do, but also you're now in on it and you need to and we're not going to tell her. We could. She's a great actress, but we're not. We want that real shit.
Yeah.
So and Paul so Leto here is starting to show signs of like rapid aging, like when the presidents all go gray during their time as presidents. And Duke says, I am tired, I'm morally tired. The melancholy degeneration of the great houses has afflicted me at last, perhaps, and we were such a strong people once. Paul spoke in quick anger. Our house hasn't degenerated. Duke, hasn't it? Now, do you think that means that because they went after this kind of foolish paper chase meaning money, chasing money in our world,
Yes.
and okay. So
Yeah, he's
as
going to
in,
talk about maybe it would have been better to go renegade.
Yeah.
So the paper chase here is really, I think what you're also referring to is just trying to win the game of Imperium, similar to trying to win the Game of Thrones, right? The question is, can I win inside the system? And is the juice worth the squeeze?
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
And I think at this moment he's calculating in his head.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could go either way. I could have gone either way.
Yeah. Yeah. So, let's see here. He's letting her know, or he's letting Paul know, here's why I haven't married your mother, although I should have. One of the things real interesting here, the melancholy degeneration of the great houses has afflicted me at last. Where am I going? I've read different parts of the Dune Encyclopedia. As I've mentioned before, it doesn't have a table of contents. That would be really helpful.
So helpful.
So you could look up specific topics. But and
Quickly.
some of them are not exactly organized the way you think they would be. But where am I going with this? There is and I read it in episode 4 or 5 or 6 or something. I read a pretty succinct timeline of the events of the universe, right?
Mhm.
And that were 10,000 years after the beginning of the guild. The more recent history, I've heard you mention they just came out of the War of the Assassins. Do you know about the recent history? Like when he says like the melancholy degeneration of the great houses is this a 5,000 year degeneration? Is it 2,000? Is it just sort of like, so I'm going to just go before you answer, one of the really awesome things about the way A Song of Ice and Fire is written is that Robert's Rebellion is not like, it doesn't start with Robert's Rebellion. We had this royal house for 300 years, the Targaryens.
Mhm.
Then there was this rebellion 17 years ago, and now we're in this new era, and we're starting to see it's already not really going well. So what happened 50 years before this or 100 years before this, if you know?
Well, I mean, yeah, we do know, but here's how I take this before we get into like the actual history.
Mm-hmm.
I take this to be like a casual toss to this idea, which is very common and also completely not supported by human history, that the hard times create strong men.
Mm-hmm.
This mythos that like a scrappy band of hardened dudes create great societies, and then those great societies create corrupt and lazy people who then cause it to degenerate. This is a myth that is not really borne out in fact. But people love it because we loved, you'd rather be the 300 and you can forget about all of the other people that fought side by side with you. Because right, there were certainly a small band of Spartans, but there was a much bigger force that participated, right? We love to identify with these small, scrappy people who overcome great odds. And then when things don't go according to and we're going to experience this throughout the book. This is there's a great article, which I'll try to include in the show notes here. I'll send it to you. It's on this, the guy gets it wrong, I think. And I've been thinking about writing a response to him, but it's this idea, he calls it Fremenism, where we identify with the Fremen because we view them as being, we view them as being the small, scrappy group. Same way we in the same way that us older people in the 80s really identify, or the way the US identified with the Mujahideen. That's a bananas story, by the way. It's like one weird senator created this whole sort of myth around, and not a myth. I mean, there are some aspects of it that are true, but got us to think of the Mujahideen as freedom fighters that we should be supported because they were in opposition to Russia.
Right.
The truth is, there's, they want to drag us all back to literally to the 7th century, and there's problems there. But anyway, in the 80s, the Mujahideen were cool. And so this idea that the Fremen, similar, it's this small scrappy group that are of hardened people who've lived in difficult times, who are going to they're going to correct things. But the truth is, all of the big advances in human history have come through farming. It's the agrarian societies who were better at warfare, who were better at building. So the very people who we're often accusing of being the softies and the people who have created this sort of degenerate age are in fact the people who created the good times.
Right.
The scrappy people living in shitty areas, they're scrappy and they are hardened because they have not been able to secure the best lands.
Right.
Not because of some internal virtue that makes them better. They were actually not able to get access to better lands. And as a result, they end up living on the fringes. Now, some of those people were very good fighters, but these are like guerrilla fighters fighting against modernity.
Right.
Is that to be celebrated? Like, I have a real problem with that idea.
Right. It's kind of like, the Goths sacked Rome, but by that point, the Goths were all veterans of the Roman army.
That's right. That's right.
So they were, I mean, there's the, if you listen to Patrick Wyman's The Fall of Rome, he'll talk about the idea that by the time that the Goths sacked Rome, they had supplanted a lot of, they were Roman. They were just sort of
absolutely Roman.
They were a different Roman. So it was a
more
this
is where this is where xenophobia comes from as well, right? Because what did Rome do? When they were pressed with these refugees, they allowed them in.
Yep.
And then there's this idea that these foreign forces then come in and destroy everything.
Yeah. I
mean, it is true in this sense that like the result of the fall of Rome was literally like, I think Dan Harmon puts it best when he says it's like the internet got turned off.
Yeah. Right.
It's so bad that in England they didn't know that the Romans had been there.
Right.
Which I find, or same thing in some parts of Germany. So it's fascinating to me. It's like literally a big piece of history went away. But this is not because it's not because of a degenerate society. Anyway, that's how I read this. I read this as a throwback to that idea.
I think another way of putting it, maybe not actually the same thing you're talking about, but the Goths from several hundred years ago did not sack Rome.
Right.
That's right. They did not have
different
success. Right. So, okay. Let's see here. So, Paul, I'm sick of, the degeneracy of our houses. We're going to do this not very great thing. By the way, I've heard you, Jeff, mention the term bravura a couple times, and I've been like, okay, well, I know that word, but like, I didn't realize it was mentioned so directly in this book. But I refound
It shows up a couple of places, right?
Yeah,
It comes up when Jessica is thinking about the portrait of Leto's father.
Mhm.
And it comes up again here. It's a leader. So when we talk about Jocko,
Let me read the quote real quick.
Go for it. Yeah.
Okay. Nothing wins more loyalty for a leader than an air of bravura, the Duke said. I, therefore, cultivate an air of bravura.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. This is that we talked about it a lot on this podcast. It's the performative nature of leadership.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
There's some very famous acts, right? The best example is a fictional example, but in my mind, I always think of Robert Duvall in Apocalypse Now,
Mm-hmm.
where he simply just stands with perfect posture, bare-chested, fucking bullets and bombs and all sorts of shit going off around him,
Mm-hmm.
and takes a deep breath, lights a cigar, and just and is looking at the waves.
Uh-huh.
Who's going to surf, right? That is an act of leadership, meaning it is a performative thing. When he tells them, you either have to surf or fight, these are acts meant to be witnessed by others.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think, is what Leto is referring to. When he says he cultivates it, he is drawing these beliefs to him by capitalizing on moments where he can do similar things. Also, what's his name? MacArthur, right? When he slaps that kid, very famously, got him in a lot of trouble. But those kinds of acts they're performative.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
No. Okay.
So, so then we find out, so there were those posters we talked about, like who really posted again, this doesn't prove it, but it's more the idea that.
Wait, one second.
Yeah.
In the very next sentence, he talks about the fact that what really, because so then Paul compliments him. He's like, "You're a great leader," or whatever.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Yeah, my propaganda wing is very good."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, earlier those bills were posted, right? Saying I'm here at the behest of the emperor to peacefully lead this blah, 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 end of hostilities. And we, Mike and Jeff, talked about the idea of like, who actually posted those? Do we know? No, I'm not saying this is no proof that the propaganda corps did it, but it's just interesting that the bills were introduced before, realizing that, of course, Duke has, he's got a PR team. And they may or may not post those bills, but they certainly do other things. Spice is being used, spice resin or whatever, dust is used to turn into film. We mustn't run short of film base, the Duke said, else how could we flood village and city with our information? The people must learn how well I govern them. How would they know if we didn't tell them? Shrug, right? I find that to be interesting, and so that's a cynical thing, right? The people are rubes, and they need to be told what good is, right? They need to be told what effective is. They need to be told this is going well for them, ostensibly, because that's what's going to get buy-in. And I just love this, Paul. You should get some rest, Paul said. So I don't know if that's these aren't I don't to the degree that is Paul indicating these aren't the things we say out loud, or these aren't the things.
It's getting a little dark, right? It's going to get darker here, right? Because I think he also starts to talk about how you're going to have to, you'll compromise your self-respect. You will be a guerrilla in a hunted, and you'll have to do things that are terrible.
Yeah, he says Arrakis has another advantage. Spice is in everything. It has some immunities against the type of poisons people use. We have to watch every drop of water because of the scarcity of water. So we cannot kill off large segments of our population with poison, and we cannot be attacked this way either. Arrakis makes us moral and ethical. Wow. Okay, cool. So it's no one wants to be poisoned. People would prefer be alive. It's good that we can't be poisoned this way. But I mean, I guess it's on the table that we could kill off large portions. We could kill off large segments of our population some way or another if we need
Mhm.
to. One way we can't do it is poison. So that's that's
There's
helpful.
yeah, there's a reason that I don't know if we've talked about my pyramid of corporate personalities, but there's a reason that the top of the pyramid is referred to as the sociopaths.
Uh-huh.
Right? It's not that they are sociopathic, but it's that at the highest levels of an organization, decisions that they make can have impacts that shears away entire departments or
Mhm.
businesses within a large conglomerate.
Mhm.
And they have to consider those decisions without thinking about the impact to the individuals.
Right.
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 So if our runway for doing business has shrunk and I'm the CEO, I might decide to cut n number of jobs,
Mhm.
or but the decision would not be let's fire Fred because he's late all the time, and then right, you've got this list of 10,000 people, he doesn't go over it and like question the individual, and not always are managers allowed to fight for individuals.
Mhm.
Because they just decide to sell off or shut down some part of the business because it's
Mhm.
losing money. So
Mhm.
sociopaths, right?
Right.
Then you got the managers in the middle just to fill out the pyramid. They're clueless. They're clueless because they typically don't actually understand the messaging that's coming from the top,
Mhm.
but they repeat it in weird ways. And then, so that's like the Michael Scotts of the world who don't really
Mhm.
understand. Michael Scott famously at one point was being offered a VP position
Mhm.
and turned it down because he didn't understand what was happening.
Wait, when was that?
It was, what's his boss's name?
David?
David,
David
right? So
Wallace?
David Wallace. So I cannot remember the.
Wait, wait.
Go
He
ahead.
interviewed for one and he was rejected, but
Yeah, but he was. Go ahead.
I'm trying to think, was this the episode?
It was in a
where
private conversation between the two of them. And
was that the one where they called him to New York and said, "How are you being so successful?" And
yes.
he didn't really know how to, he was like, "Well, let's get pasta and talk about this."
Uh-huh.
Yes. Yeah, okay.
That's exactly right. And so the hidden, so
was that after Ryan? Sorry, because I'm trying to think. He interviewed and then he didn't get the job, and then Ryan, and this was after. Okay.
This was after, right?
Yeah, okay.
So they're having pasta. I love pasta.
Yeah.
It always reminds me of the run for rabies or whatever.
Yeah.
He like carb loads.
Carb loads. Yeah.
But anyway, so because David is speaking in David language, the language of the sociopaths, and he's offering him a position. Essentially, he's like, "This is how we could reward you," and Michael Scott doesn't understand it, so he rejects it.
I don't remember what the reward was. Was it shut down?
He was offering it, but he at that point he could have taken a corporate position. I don't think it involved shutting anything down. I think it was just, I have to go review the episode, but in my memory, here's my memory of it though. The offer is being offered in the language of the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
Michael cannot really understand what's happening. He doesn't reject it plainly because he can't see it. Right. He rejects it by misunderstanding what's being said to him.
Right.
There are many other examples of this.
Yeah, there's that like awkward, there's that awkward handshake at the end where it's like, okay, well, it was good talking to you.
That's right. Yeah. And what I think what David is expecting is, yes, like I'm in, but what you have instead is this like unresolved thing, right? Why? Because he didn't really understand it. There's lots of others. Anyway, at the bottom of the pyramid, so we have the sociopaths, the clueless, and then we have what are referred to as losers. They're not losers. So sorry to anybody who's in this group. You're not losers because there's something wrong with you or you're bad people. You're losers because you're not economically incented in the same way that the two top tiers are. Mm-hmm. That's why you're losers. And so that's like Jim Halpert. Jim Halpert actually does understand the language at the top, but he remains in the loser category because he's not looking for money or position. He wants Pam. Mm-hmm. Right. So without his perspective, that show would not have been nearly as funny. But you need someone who can actually translate what's happening. Mm-hmm. at the two levels so that you can fully understand how bananas things really are. I mean, it would have been okay. It would have been mildly funny, but I think this part makes it genius. So
Yeah.
just to sum up, sociopath at the top. Why? Because their decision making has impact on potentially large numbers of individuals without any consideration for the impact to those individuals.
Mm-hmm.
Even this does not mean that CEOs are all heartless. They will know that collectively lots of good people will suffer as a result of these decisions. They're not unaware of that fact.
Mm-hmm.
But what they are not taking into consideration is the actual impact to any specific individual.
Right.
Yeah.
And I would go a step farther and say, in that analysis, there's something to the effect of, I'm not giving you my lunch over this, right?
Yeah.
You could, you'll bounce back. You'll figure something out,
Yeah. I mean, so we've already tackled some elements of police corruption. We could talk about the part where, so what is actually immoral at the top is that those financial incentives, which have really gone bananas. So you could, so if the disparity between the average worker and the CEO were some reasonable number, maybe it's 10x the compensation, right? Now your decision making is probably a little different. But when you're like, you're making hundreds of times more than the people beneath you, then often you're making decisions simply to maintain that income level.
Mm-hmm.
It isn't really about the business's bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that's where that's where they're truly become psychopaths, because now they are concerned about really one human in the equation themselves.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we can't poison people. That's great. How great.
Not here. Maybe somewhere else. Not here, though.
By the way, if the inability to do it because of environmental constraints keeps you moral, I would suggest you're not moral. Or it's possible that you're not moral.
I'm gonna get us in so much trouble. It's a very Trumpian morality, right?
We couldn't do it. Couldn't do it.
Probably would like to have just bombed them.
I guess I knew going into it. It wasn't an option, so I didn't even think about it. So
yeah,
that's
well, then praising his high morality. Yeah. I shouldn't just lay that at the feet of Trump, though. That there have been many historical leaders who have behaved similarly.
Yeah,
their morality was really an artificial constraint that they couldn't control.
Right. So, Paul started to speak, but the Duke cut him off. I have to have someone I can say these things to, son. He sighed, glanced black. So he's like, I gotta be able to talk. I don't know.
I mean, why don't you get a fucking friend, bro, instead of your kid?
Why don't you tell this to Thufir? I don't know.
Get a therapist.
Is this? I mean, I don't know. What's your thought on? I mean, is this helping groom Paul to lead? Well, hold on. Let's pause on that.
It's a great question. Yeah.
Let's pause on that. I'm gonna save your answer for 1 second, because we can just wrap this up in terms of the actual story here.
Yes.
He sighed. He looked, on Caladan, we ruled with sea and air power. Obviously, shit, it's Caladan, a lot of water, so they probably had naval ships and the equivalent, fighter jets and the equivalent thereof. Here we have to scrabble for desert power. This is your inheritance, Paul. What is to become of you if anything happens to me? You'll not be a renegade house, but a guerrilla house, running, hunted. To hold Arrakis, one is faced with decisions that may cost one his self-respect. He pointed out the window to the Atreides' green and black banner hanging limply from a staff at the edge of the landing field. That honorable banner could come to mean many evil things. Power and fear, the states of toolcraft. I must order new emphasis on guerrilla training for you. That film clip there, they call you Mahdi Lisan al-Gaib. As a last resort, you might capitalize on that. And then basically he's like, what the fuck? My next meeting was supposed to start. And that's the end of the chapter. Yeah. So is this helping groom him for leadership, do you think?
A little bit. There's some mistakes here, but I think in general, yes, right? So
Yeah.
we could talk a little bit about the ethics of Machiavelli's approach,
Mhm.
which there is an ethical framework. I think many people assume they understand who Machiavelli is because we commonly associate him with like unscrupulous leadership.
Mhm.
But I would say that what he's really doing is his system, Machiavelli's system, is focused on this idea that a leader should be authentic, which is
Mhm.
not bad advice. You should like root out corruption and establish a rule of law. Those are also good things. He does claim that leaders will have to do bad things.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of what Leto is pointing to here. But he in general advocates kind of establishing goodwill and common bonds between the leader and the followers, and that's not a bad approach. So
Mhm.
I think in general, Leto is doing a reasonably good job of preparing his son for the fact that leaders often have to make those kinds of sociopathic decisions, and that he needs to be prepared to take those actions when they're necessary. But in
Mhm.
general, he is giving him advice to be, both in the performative sense and in the actual sense, someone that people can, in whom someone can place their trust, in whom someone can believe good things.
Mhm.
Yes. So that makes it easier for your propaganda corps when you actually do things that are helpful and beneficial, right?
Mhm.
So yes, I think he is. I think where he's making a huge mistake is in exposing this subplot about the mother.
Mhm. Mhm.
But otherwise, I think, yeah, he is preparing Paul for the realities of leadership.
Yeah. What one of the things we said in the last episode, I want to kind of try to square this circle here,
Mhm.
is fuck it, this may have been on the version that was deleted. It may or may not have been. Okay, let's contextualize this.
Mhm.
Last episode, we started recording. We weren't sure if it got recorded because of a power outage,
Yes.
uncontrollable, and then we started re-recording. But Jeff, one of the things you mentioned on one of the two recordings, I don't know which, was this idea of how the hell did Thufir not know more about the Mahdi and the Lisan al-Gaib earlier?
Oh, yeah.
How did Duncan, how did they not have sort of a Paul is the Mahdi plan in place before they even got to the planet? Like, why weren't
You'd
they?
think like report number 3.
Right.
Number 1 is there's not a lot of water, and
Right.
but there's a lot of smelly hippies living
Yeah.
in the
Right.
desert,
Right.
and they could fight real good. That'd be report number 2. Report number 3 should have been, and they're all waiting for the Mahdi or the Lisan al-Gaib. They are dying, literally waiting for the return of the presence of these beings, and they fit the pattern of
Mhm.
Lady Jessica and potentially of Paul.
Mhm. Mhm.
They would have been exploiting it from the beginning, or should have been exploiting
And
it
this
from the
is
beginning.
this is when I said I want to square the circle.
Yeah.
So Leto has the information. I don't know, 2 weeks. It's so hard to understand when they started planning this trip. Obviously,
Literally 5 minutes after they got the contract.
fucking, like, was it 2 months ago they were on Caladan and they got the news? I don't know, but I guess we've lost some time, but we've lost some time for planning.
Mhm.
But at least while he's still alive and they're on planet, Leto's given it to, he's first off, there's some Frank Herbert, the author, foreshadowing of that honorable banner could come to mean many evil things. So what we're talking about is not even in the book Dune, really. We're talking about Dune Messiah, the next book in the series. So good on you, Frank, for planning that. But then Leto is saying to Paul, like, use everything you have access to. This whole Mahdi Lisan al-Gaib thing, like, you could use that. That could be a thing you should consider if it comes to it. So they've lost a little bit of time, but what do you think in not having, what do you think the difference is between the hypothetical 2 months they could have been working this plan versus we just got it today and it's not really like we haven't organized our team?
I don't.
You know,
So
does what I'm saying make sense?
it does, yeah. I think that this is part of how the Harkonnens. I think this was engineered scarcity of time on purpose, right? This is the whole idea of the OODA loop. So who's winning? Who's winning the OODA loop right now? The Harkonnens and the Emperor. Why? Because as is plainly visible as a reader, our sense of time is distorted. Their sense of time is not. Things are moving far too fastly for Leto to really keep track of everything that's going on. Whereas for at this moment for the Harkonnens and for the Emperor, everything is sort of evolving exactly the way they expected it to. So I think the rush was intentional as part as a way to sow chaos. We use that theory when we attacked Iraq. As a matter of fact, it's part of our modern warfare strategy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've talked about the Republican Guard in the past.
Yeah.
So same idea.
2 episodes ago, 1 episode ago, something like that. Yeah.
Yes, but same idea is present here. So they're not in control of their own sense of time at the moment. Soon, though, the tables will turn.
Well, what's also interesting is here's a question. Here's a question.
Yes.
Do they do anything with this Mahdi Lisana? I'm trying to literally remember. In the coming chapters, does anything of this idea get used, or is it
there's
not really thought of?
A little bit, but there's not much time. Like literally, they don't have enough time to really put shit together. Things are going to change very quickly, right?
Yeah. Well, there we go. That's the chapter. This is a short one.
Before we end, I wanted to tie back a direct quote. So some people may be like, Machiavelli, what? So here's the direct quote that I think is so applicable here. If a prince who wants to always act honorably is surrounded by many unscrupulous men, his downfall is inevitable. Therefore, a ruler who wishes to maintain his power must learn to be not good when this becomes necessary. And that is literally the message. I think it's almost verbatim the message that is being given to Paul. In dangerous times, you may have to do unscrupulous things. And that by itself is an act of good leadership.
And then 300 years later, Nietzsche would say, but don't go too far.
Careful.
Exactly. So, all right. So this is a short episode. We recorded this on 4/25. I don't know what else to say. Last night, Rose Numa Humanus. That's not the way she says it, but Thug Rose. Head kicked out. I'm also Hank. I don't know her name. Zhang.
By the way, who is an amazing fighter, who I have a ton of respect for. Rose hit that woman so hard. Did you see her get
crumpled?
up?
Yeah.
But not just when she went down. When they tried to bring her up, she was like, God damn. So I follow her. Follow her training regimen. She trains hard. She was absolutely prepared to win that fight, and Rose knocked the living daylights out of her. I am a big Rose fan. I was not on the cancel Rose bus.
Why?
I like to say
because of the better dead than red bullshit. Yeah, I wouldn't consider that controversial so much as just hacky. Yeah, but that's just me.
As a person and a fighter, I can look past a lot. Like, look, I have a lot of friends who are in this sort of jujitsu fight world. We don't share. There's a lot of things we don't share, like politically or in other realms, but we do share the sport. And I'm absolutely for her as a martial artist. I love her approach to fighting. I love her approach to training. And I was absolutely, as much as I love Zhang, I was absolutely happy to see that outcome. It was a tough fight for me because I love both those fighters a lot.
Let's just say that I'll just summarize I'm low moral, high aesthetic, right?
Yes.
You can do almost anything as long as it has an aesthetic quality to it.
Yeah.
And you can't do shit, in my opinion, if it comes off as hacky or lame. So that's how you get a nihilistic 21st century man like me.
Gotcha.
Anyway, so
Did
and
you
Chris
watch a little
Weidman-
too much Daria when you were a kid?
Wait, what?
Did you watch a little too much Daria?
No,
when you were a
no,
kid?
no. I didn't have cable. And that was on MTV. And then Chris Weidman, you hate to see it. His leg literally broke the way it did for Anderson Silva in that same fight. I think I'm just trying to buy some time here, but I actually am really, really busy, and I know so you are as well. So maybe we should wrap. Look, if get us that feedback. Does the police talk? Did the Batushka? Do you care about any of this? Does anyone actually ever check the show notes or for the links? I mean, because we spend time trying to find those. If no one has ever clicked on a YouTube video or website from the show notes, that's fine. Why we don't need to include them? That's fine.
Also, we should do a quick shout out. So there's been some rumbling in the Facebook group, mostly by me, that I was going to do we were going to do a read along, like a book club. That is that's going to happen, and we're going to start getting that scheduled pretty quick here.
Okay.
So if you're a listener and you haven't checked out the Facebook group, let me tell you, I'm definitely unhappy that Facebook is where we landed, but this is where people wanted to engage with us. So here we are, right? So anyway, if you're in that group, we're going to run this thing. We might run it through Discord, or I don't know what the technology is going to be, but we're going to do a book club, and you're all absolutely invited. That's all I have to say about that.
Okay. All right. Well, we are off next weekend, although the release cadence is sometime, who knows when you'll actually be listening to this. I don't know, 3 weeks from now. So yeah. All right. Bye.
Bye.
Like and subscribe wherever you listen to this podcast. And to hear more readings, become a Patreon supporter at Patreon/Decode Podcast.